Hey everyone, welcome back to Body Haven Soaps. My name is Darlene. I am the owner and creator of Body Haven Soaps, and the goal of this channel is to help fellow creators create. So I have been working really hard to get stock updated, and it's been a challenge through the Christmas to get you guys all these videos, but now we are getting back on track and we're hoping that it stays that way. And I'm trying to build stock so I can get my online store back up and running. So soap is something that I have to make a lot of. This is a brand new, I wouldn't say recipe, it's the same recipe I've made many times before. However, I'm going to attempt to make soap on the rope for the very first time. I have bought this silk rope and I have cut it to length and tied knots in it to push this into the soap bar and hopefully have it secured and still be able to cut it with my soap cutter. So the only reason I'm attempting to do this, I never even thought about doing soap on a rope, but my dad, who is up in age, he requested that I do soap on a rope. He likes using my soap. However, with the arthritis and stuff in his hands, it's very hard for him to hold on to it. So he requested that I try to make him a soap on the rope. So that is what we're doing today. So I've never done this before, and we're going to see if this turns out. So it's an adventure for all of us, but let's get started. Okay, so once again, we have just my basic soap recipe. So olive oil, palm oil, coconut oil, and our castor oil. So just the basic soap bar recipe, because I don't want to get too fancy until I have this all figured out how this soap on the rope is going to work. So basic soap recipe. I am going to add in my 1.5 ounce kaolin clay. You guys know how I like to add my clays into my products, and I love the kaolin clay in here. And I always mix this into the oils previously, so there's less mixing and more work time. I've gone over that in previous videos. Once again, because I've really fallen in love with putting the coconut milk into my soaps. So 7 ounces of the coconut milk as well is going into here. And then we will use the blender. Now, this hand mixer, it's a little different than my older one. It is really powerful, so it doesn't take very long to bring this to trace. So really, depending on your machine will depend on how long that I'm going to mix this for as well. This one has a lot of power even on the lowest setting. Okay, so I have all of my kaolin clay and coconut milk mixed into the oil mixture. And now I have, and I'm just using basic distilled water and my lye in here. And you guys should always put all your recipes through soap calc. Even if you take a recipe that I've put on, you should always go and input that yourself, because the last thing you want to do is have irritation to skin. Make sure that all of your ratios are correct for this, all right? So this is just my lye and my water solution. We are going to put this in. And everything was at room temperature, okay? And I'm just going to bring this to a light trace. And then as I mix my colors in, because I actually want to do a layered color for this one, I will blend it more to get it to that thickness where it's going to hold the next layer of soap. And with this hand mixer, it does not take long to get this to trace at all. Okay, so now I have this to a very light trace, as you can see on there. I don't want to overmix this. I will put in, I'm going to actually take this out just because I do not want to get this starting to thicken too quick. And I will hand mix the rest of this in. All right, so the fragrance that I am going to use, it's actually from Windy Point. It's called 50 Shades, okay? It says that it does not accelerate, it does not discolor or accelerate trace. However, I've used this one before. It does accelerate trace a fair bit. In my recipe, maybe in the recipe they used, it didn't. In mine, it does. So I will stir this in by hand. So I'm putting in my 3 ounces of fragrance oil, and I always mix it into my main batch just because I want to make sure it's even throughout, so I don't have parts of my soap that have more fragrance oil in it than others. You can kind of see this almost gives a yellowish tinge to this. So there is going to be, even though there's no vanilla content in this, it is going to discolor to a little bit of a yellow or tan color. I can tell just by mixing it in there because I've used enough fragrance oils in the past. I'm going to actually try and divide this into 3 colors. So I'm going to pour so much in there. Let's say that's close to even. There's probably a little bit more in here than there, so we're going to take just a little bit more here. All right, so we're going to start out with the brown. And because I want this to be thick enough to hold the next layer, I will use my blender to thicken this to bring trace a little bit quicker. So I'm going to use, this is gingerbread mica from Windy Points. I have a little bit in this container, so I'm going to start with that first to get that used up. I will use my stick blender because I want this base to thicken up. Get all this scraped down so I don't have multiple colors throughout. And I mean, soap making, you guys, is one of those things that it's going to take trial and error. And you learn by doing. So start with smaller batches. You can get pretty small molds. I've shown you in another video some of the molds that I use. You can buy just cheap silicone molds off of Amazon that you can just make 1 pound batches and play around till you get it all figured out. Okay, I would say that's mixed quite well. I'm going to just set that off to the side for a second and move on to my next one. So my next layer is going to be orange, and I'm going to use KO orange from Mad Mica. And you can, by all means, mix this stuff with oil, a little bit of the oil previous to mixing, whatever works for you. This is how I like to do it. definitely thickened up quite a bit. You can see how when you use the mixer, how it thickens, and you can control the consistency of your soap just through the blending process. But like I say, it's all learned thing. You got to go through the steps. All right, so I'm happy with that orange. And then in here, I am going to do just some titanium dioxide to make it off-white color. This is going to thicken up fairly fast with the titanium dioxide, so, oops. Mix that by hand. Okay, so let's get our mold out. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do, you guys, is get my brown in the bottom. And then I'm going to give it a quick little tap. Get it all level. Okay, and then I want to go in with my orange. Now, my orange is fairly thick, as you guys can see. Okay, my brown is fairly thick. I'm going to pour onto my spatula to prevent it and hopefully try and create a layer. You know, it works out most times. Other times you have a little bit of loop here and there, but in general, just pouring onto your spatula works well enough to be able to slow it down. Well, we're going to start down here. I'm just going to use my spatula to kind of level it out. And we want to get rid of some of the stuff that I slopped all over the place, because you guys, you're going to make messes, and that's part of the normal process. I like to use a little popsicle stick. You can see where I have it along the edges here. And if I take this stick and just run it along the silicone, it actually will pull all of that stuff, the majority of it, right off of my silicone mold, so that I can have a nice layer. Okay. And then we're going to do the exact same thing with the off-white color. All right, so now that I have that done, I have to try and place in my ropes. So as you can see, these are my 1-inch cut marks here on my mold. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the popsicle stick. I'm going to push this knot down into the soap loaf, and I'm going to try and keep it as straight as I can, so when I cut this with my soap cutter, I'm not going to have any problems. Now, they're fairly big knots with this size rope, but you need a rope that is fairly soft and easy on the skin. You don't want a rough rope. So we're going to see how this works. turn this around. You can see on these molds that I purchased, they have 1 inch on one side and 1.5 inch on the other. So I got to make sure I'm using the right one. And I'm just going to see if I can push these down. I don't even have to use, and you notice I cut the long ends off so that that hopefully doesn't get in my way when I'm cutting. So we're gonna see how this works, but I don't even have to use the popsicle stick to sink these. And I'm just gonna try and be really careful so that I keep it within my cutting distance, and hopefully my soap cutter will perfectly. Okay, and I can fit 2 more in here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. I never usually get 20 bars. I usually get 18, so we'll see what happens. But we're gonna leave it like this, guys, and then we're gonna come back and I'll bring you back in 48 hours when this is ready to be cut, and we're gonna cut and see how this works. The only other thing I'm gonna do is just quickly spray this with rubbing alcohol to help prevent that soda ashing, frosting on top of the soap. All right, you guys, so this is my soap on the rope. We're gonna see how this turns out. As you can see on top, I did get a little bit of a crack. It just started to heat, and then when it expands, there was no room for it to expand. That's one of the things about these molds, is there's no give to them. So it gives you that perfect straight edge, but it does hold the heat, and then it starts to expand in the mold, so you do get these cracks. But once you cut them, it really is not as noticeable, so I don't find it quite so bad. We'll just get these out of there. The real test of this soap is going to be to see if I can cut between the ropes here, and if this works, or maybe I need to make these soap bars a little bit bigger rather than my 1 inch. I may have to make these the 1.5 inch. So what happens in our first attempt? We get to see how our lines worked out as well on this. But as I've said before, the best part about being able to make these handmade soaps and be creative is that they're all kind of individualized. I'm just trying to get it out of here without moving those ropes too much. Try and lift it off. It's almost like suction. So we can look and see those lines don't look too bad. On the bar, appeared to turn out okay. So that's looking good so far. Now we need to see whether we can cut between the ropes or not. So let's get this on the cutter. And I actually want to start with this side. And if you guys find that your soap is still too wet when you first take it out of the mold, because with putting the coconut milk in here, it is still quite a soft soap, only sitting this long. You can either leave it sit for another another 24 hours. It should be just fine. However, these do hold in a lot of the moisture. So if I was gonna let it set, I would get it out to this point and then leave it sit open like this and then cut it the following day. But let's see how this works out to cut between my knots. So you can see the knot kind of went into my soap bar there a little bit right there. So I have a very weird cut where the wire actually hit it there. So I'm really, you can see it's getting right onto that. So I'm really thinking I'm going to have to do these 1.5 inches to make my life a little bit easier. Okay, so as we can see, some of these, I mean, obviously we've got some where the knots are right through. That rope is not going to stay in there very long. I wouldn't call that a very good soap bar. I mean, my dad will have lots to try. You know, like that one's a little bit closer, but that knot is still really close to the end. So as you can see that it's coming through, that's only going to hold for so long. So a few things that I learned while doing this. We have some that, you know, the knot's in a lot deeper. You can still see it's coming through a little bit. But I think that one's going to be, you know, not a horrible soap on a rope, so to say. And then we have some that the knot was perfectly placed in there and that one will hold. But yeah, I have lots of those weird cuts, lots with all the knots through it where it just doesn't look like it's going to hold for very long. So then, yeah, it's a soap on a rope, but once it wears through, like this little piece here and that soap's used up, it's no longer going to be a soap on a rope. So I'm not thinking that that's a very quality product. And some of them are super thin compared to my 1 inch as I had to go around it. So let's take a quick look at how we could fix this. One thing that I did notice while I was cutting this is a lot of them where I thought I was centering them, so to say, it really wasn't centering them at all. I could do one of two things. I could go and make these soap bars a little bit bigger and make them 1.5, okay, which is probably the safest way to get a quality product. Now, if I would have moved all of my ropes, as you can notice, some of them moved to the front and some of them are tried to center. And the ones that I tried to center, the knot is sticking through. The ones that, you know, are moved kind of towards the front, it is kind of coming through, but that is because of where my cut was. So if I moved all of the ropes towards the center or towards the back line, then I think I would have more. But being centered is where you're going to have the most amount of hold. So I will go, I'm 100% positive, I will go with making these with the 1.5 inch soap bar just to give that extended width, because I think I'll have better hold. Another thing that I noticed while I was cutting these, and I never thought about it, the knot only goes this far down the soap bar. It's only going into the white layer here. It's not going down far enough. So once this corner of the soap bar is used up, that rope's not going to hold very well. So what I will do, I think the next time go around that I do with this, I will make this a little bit longer, and I will make sure that I get it pushed down, even if I have to use a stick, one of these, oh, I don't have any here, even a stick, cheap disposable chopstick, and push it down so I at least, you know, I can measure the depth of what I'm going to need it, so that it's more centralized on an angle like that, if that makes sense. Because if I can get the rope in on an angle, it's going to go across, and that's going to hold a lot longer and make them a little bit wider. So rope a little bit longer, make sure that I get them put in, not straight down because it's too close to the edge of the soap bar, on an angle. And these are things that I didn't think about until I went to go cut them tonight, and the little things that make the biggest difference in a quality product, right? And I've said this a million times in my videos, you guys, we learn by trial and error. You can't be scared. You've got to move forward and try things, and then take a look at it and how can I make that better. So simply, this is an absolutely doable project that I will probably be doing again and adding into my collection. However, I will do longer ropes, right? It's because this is a nice size for a hand to go through, but I want it to go down and into the soap bar on an angle so that it holds longer till closer to the end of that soap bar. And I'm going to make my soap bars 1.5 inches wide rather than just the inch, because with just the inch, it's just too close, and once again, it's not going to hold. But that is how my very first attempt went, and it's not perfect. Is it going to work? Yes. All right, you guys take care, and we will see you again soon.